Hi, everyone, and welcome to Top Go-to-Market Trends for 2025. I'm Jenny Herbison, SVP of Marketing Exclaimer, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. In my role, I spend a lot of time thinking about how we bring products to market, how we build trust with customers, and how we align across sales, marketing, and customer success. If you're here, chances are you're thinking about those same challenges because go-to-market is in the middle of a major transformation. We're moving beyond siloed functions and into a new era of cross-functional collaboration, buyer-led journeys, and smarter, more connected teams. Today, we're here to explore where go-to-market is headed and what it takes to build and scale a modern, aligned go-to-market engine in 2025. I'm thrilled to be joined by two fantastic speakers. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to Vanessa Mayer, a founder of Growth Wise and a leading consultant on B2B SaaS growth strategies, cross-functional collaboration, and experimentation. I had the pleasure of working with Vanessa at Craft Docs. We worked very closely together during a pivotal time scaling the company. And let me tell you, Vanessa is the person you want in the trenches when you're trying to make this meaningful growth happen. She brings razor-sharp lens to growth strategies, aligning product engineering and marketing around one cohesive model. She's strategic, sharp, and just a joy to work with. So I'm thrilled for you to hear from her today. Our other speaker today is our very own Sales Enablement Director, James Lewington, known as JL by us all. He plays a key part in shaping and driving our go-to-market strategy. He keeps us all, our go-to-market teams aligned, equipped, and ready to deliver value from the first customer interaction. Above all, again, a joy to work with. And he'll be talking about some of the fantastic things we're doing here at Exclaimer. So for the next 60 minutes, we'll dig into what's working, what's changing, and how to stay ahead in 2025. And make sure to stick around until the end for some actionable takeaways. Now, with all that, let's dive in. Let's start with you, Vanessa, and let's talk just about that go-to-market collaboration in 2025, the big picture. We've been chatting a lot about how the old go-to-market model with those, marketing gets leads, sales closes, CS keeps them. It's just not working anymore. So from your point of view, what's replacing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that old handoff model, that almost like waterfall method, it's just not cutting it anymore. These playbooks, this very sort of prescriptive, predictive way of going about things. Marketing brings in the leads, nurtures them a little, hands it off to an RDR, someone who qualifies, and sales picks it up. And then there's just this, yeah, it's a handoff, and there's very little feedback loop. It doesn't work in a world where the buyer journey is, what is it called? That hexagon. I can't remember what it's called, but that journey just doesn't look like how we're sort of structuring our companies internally. And more than that, the customers are expecting a more seamless, smooth, and delightful experience. We have to be thinking a little bit more dynamically, and that's what is often called dynamic teaming. So bringing together teams for short-term projects, cross-functional teams from marketing, sales, CS, product engineering, come together, solve these ambiguous customer experience problem, buyer experience problems, come together, ideate together, try things out together, disband, and reform. So it's often referred to as dynamic teaming. And I think what's particularly critical to this is the companies that are doing it well are recognizing that for those dynamic teams to be effective, there has to be a particular culture, a culture of failing fast, iterating, testing things, experimenting, learning from each other, and moving on and continuing to run that. So it's sort of that agile methodology, but really sort of more loosely applied to the broader go-to-market organization and the type of work that's done there.
Absolutely. That really hit home for me. I think in the last 6 months at Exclaimer, we have been on such a journey with this, haven't we, James? It was actually a key focus area for us, as a company, was that go-to-market alignment. And we stated it and we went out to the company about that. And there's a number of things that we have started to do. But when you're talking about that dynamic teams, one of the tactics that we have used as well is a pods and squads model. Obviously, squads, be it famous by Spotify when they structured it in that way. And a lot of companies have now taken that forward and evolved it into pods, which are those cross-functional teams that just focus on specific task or specific goal or project, like onboarding, expansion, or retention. And then they're really really responsible for that outcome and being able to tackle a project together to have real impact. And James, talk to me a little bit about what that looks like for us at Exclaimer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the pods has already made like a huge, significant difference to how we work, particularly on kind of GTM projects. I think prior to that, we were probably as a GTM team waving hands, sorry, waving at each other. But now with these pods, we're kind of like holding hands. And I
Mm.
think really like it helps, like, firstly in these pods, like everyone has the same goals, the same data, the same objectives. I think that's really critical. It's really limited the back and forth. I think like every company is guilty of Slack channels and Slack communication. Like with these pods, that's very limited. And I think it's allowing us to move a lot quicker without jeopardizing or impact the quality of the output. So it's really, really effective for us at Exclaimer.
Yeah, I think it's just brought that accountability, hasn't it? And that creativity with those cross collaboration teams. And I think that's what's critical is
Mm.
you're formalizing that cross collaboration, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's such a great example. It just showcases when you have the right structure and culture to encourage that agility and collaboration instead of holding it back with these rigid silos and processes and sort of expectations that this team does that, that team does that, or I'm an engineer, therefore I can't be held accountable for onboarding. It's like, well, no, you can. We can work in different ways and work together. It's a great example.
Absolutely. And I wanted to then go a little bit further into that with, we talk about that we've ruled, the messaging that goes across that as well. Because I think that was one of the things that, when it's siloed, getting that lovely flow of messaging. Customers don't know we're siloed into marketing and sales when they're in their journey and customer success. Our business structure sometimes can actually feel quite jarring for them and can add friction for them because that messaging, especially, in my experience, is the bit that really doesn't flow. And I know that we had that challenge, didn't we, James, where we had a certain messaging that marketing were very clear at, and they were maybe at the top of the funnel going out with, that was maybe not quite aligned with what then the sales team were going out with. And it was one of those areas that we realized we needed to tighten up. I'd love to dive into that topic a little bit more with you.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important topic. And I think when you're talking through that, from an enablement standpoint, it's all about how we communicate that internally. And it's really critical that we don't send mixed messages to our internal GTM teams when it comes to that type of thing. And one of the things that we've incorporated at Exclaimer, which we've ran for a while now, which was our kind of commercial enablement briefing, it's now been rebranded for GTM alignment. And this is where we bring our kind of marketing, CS, product teams together and our entire GTM team in one place and meet on a kind of bi-weekly basis. And it's an opportunity for those teams to say, this is what's going on. This is the messaging that we're sending out to marketing. This is the campaigns that we're working on. And it's almost like in a very like headline news format, but it works really well because it's super informative, it's snappy, and everyone is on the same call aligned. And that's something that we found really works for us.
Yeah. It was a real buzz, Vanessa, actually, when it was rolled out as well. I think, hats off to the team. You could really feel the collaboration in what was done there.
Yeah, everybody loves it. It's such a great point. I mean, messaging, yeah, not only does it confuse the market, I just get so convoluted and everybody's emphasizing different points and sort of that red thread gets lost. But everybody wants to be a good storyteller. Everybody wants to sort of reinforce the real meaning and purpose and intended value, communicated value proposition of the company. So breaking those silos, getting everybody together to sort of practice that story and get aligned on it is really smart.
Absolutely. James, what would you say to teams that want that alignment, and don't have that structure yet? What would your advice be?
I think start small is my advice. Like I think with any of these things, there's a tendency to want to do everything and involve everyone. I think to go back to that GTM alignment meeting, that was us actually starting small.
Yeah.
Really, it was like we could see the gaps, we could see the silos, and it's like what do we do to break those down quickly? A collaborative meeting where we're bringing everyone together and they're all contributing was that. And it would have been so easy for us to go overboard and convoluted, but we didn't. So I would just say start small.
Yeah.
Mm.
Keeping it really, really simple. And I think there's something there which is really interesting of actually really think about how, really planning that alignment out and thinking of the different tactics that you want to do. Vanessa, from your point of view, what's important from your point of view on that?
I'd lean into like you say, starting small, but even lean into the theme of like volunteers, because I find there's this tendency we have to like handpick the right people in the room based on their function or their competency or their seniority. But there is a point in the beginning, especially at the beginning, when you're really just trying to kick off these rituals, you're just trying to create a vibe and a connection, is go for the volunteers. The volunteers are usually the ones who are like enthusiastic to get this going, that want to form, that want to break these silos. So lean into that as a starting point and have them be the sort of the spokesperson for whatever team or function they're representing. Of course, celebrating those early wins, as well as celebrating the early failures, I would say, and go, hey, we tried something new, or hey, how's it going? Asking a team, how's it going with implementing that? It's a little awkward. Okay, let's talk about it. And really leaning in also about how we learn from the mistakes and the failures that we're making, as well as celebrating the wins.
I totally agree with that. And we did something really nice. I think there was also something about us coming together with that short-term project. We did, a end of quarter focus before we went off at December, and there was like a few weeks where we all came together and did a really lovely focus on a campaign, which was, we're going off for Christmas. Let's do a final push for the year. And there was tactics we did, didn't we, Dale, about like, stand up. But what the difference there was, and I think for me, was that the leadership team, the trust, and it's suddenly you're going in as a team, and it has to come down from leadership down. Don't get me wrong, there's those moments, at a leadership team meeting where it's hard, where there's, like there's always going to be that slight, like where's the leads coming from marketing? There's always going to be that accountability for each other on what's happening. But I think if you go in as a partnership and have that trust, that's what makes the real difference, because that comes down through the team. And then, so going in, so one of the tactics we did, that even though it was probably more of a sales call, Jael, I would be running those calls at certain points. So it would rotate between myself, the sales leader, JL, another marketing leader. And it just was this lovely rotation. We would go in part to, sometimes we would go to the salespeople, sometimes the marketing people to get updates as well. And there was a really strong signal that we were sending to the team, is that we are one team now. Jael, you were part of that. How did that shift feel for you at that point?
It was great. It's such a wake-up call, I think, for everyone in the business. And I know I said previously Slack channels, and all that kind of stuff, but we created a Slack channel for that. And that was a forum for CS reps, sales reps to put forward their ideas, like what can we do to drive growth in the business short term? And they contributed to that Slack channel in a really great way. And the great thing was we executed on their ideas really quickly. As Jenny mentioned, that Christmas campaign, that idea stemmed from a sales rep in that channel, and within 24 hours that was launched and ready to go. I hadn't seen that kind of alignment or collaboration before. Certainly not at speed. It was just fantastic to see.
Yeah, it was. It was a really exciting time. So we've talked about some of the tactics and starting to form, a team, and just getting that signal out there that we are going to align, and how important that is from leadership down. But then you've got to properly build it and structure it. You've got to build out those go-to-market teams that can scale. So if we talk about that structure, Vanessa, I'd love to come to you on this. You have helped a lot of companies scale their go-to-market motions. What are you seeing in terms of organizational design now for go-to-market teams in 2025?
I'm seeing more the work like you guys did in terms of these pods and squads that are focused on stages of the customer journey rather than sort of functions like marketing, sales. Like you can still have that. You can bring in hybrid and dynamic. So you can have marketing, sales, whatever, but you allow people, again, maybe starting off from a volunteer perspective, which is super motivational for employees to participate in something else. These cross-functional pods or dynamic teams that come together that are organized to take on a challenge or an objective that's mapped to stages of the customer journey. So that's something I'm seeing a lot and I'm really excited about. And I think it gets everybody really motivated to work that in these cross-functional groups. And what I'm really excited about and passionate about and hope to see more of is that the ethos and the spirit of those teams is very sort of experimental. It is a lot about, let's try things out. Let's try something that is a little bit more from the sales angle, from the marketing angle, from the product angle, but work in these cross-functional pods. The other thing is that is around RevOps. I love RevOps. I'm such a big respect for JL's function and everything that goes on there, and the revenue ops function. I think they just bring order out of the chaos. I like to see, what I'm seeing more and more is let's bring forward this greater sense of experimentation and chaos and embrace the ambiguity, especially if it's signaled from the leaders above that like, hey, you can make mistakes. Hey, you can try and learn, and that's acceptable. And then, when things spark and something hits and something works, you got your great RevOps team that's there to operationalize it, to turn it into a bit more systematic way of doing things and makes it more efficient. So a big respect to RevOps coming in and taking in a bigger place. But I would caution, my only caution is I have seen some of this more growth experimentation in RevOps. I mean, it can work. It becomes a bit bloated. So I do think that have these cross-functional units, these pods, these squads, these dynamic teams mapped to the stages of the customer journey to test things, to iterate, to move fast. When something sticks, when something works, when we really want to scale that out, then you really rely on RevOps to take it to the next level and operationalize it.
Amazing. And James, what are your thoughts about structure, that you've started to see play out as we make this shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, I guess, like structure and alignment, like, I guess where my head is at now is I'm trying not to like make assumptions that what we're doing doesn't impact other teams. And actually, maybe more importantly, what we're doing, other teams won't care about because it's just not true. And like right now we're working on a thing in our sales team which is like operational command. So it's KPIs, it's rituals, it's communication channels, things that sales people and sales managers should be agreeing to in terms of their weekly cadence. Actually, the conversation I've had with our support team, our business systems team, our CS team, they're actually not only interested in learning about it, but want to contribute towards it. So I guess when I'm thinking of structure and alignment, my head is now don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
People care about what you're doing and they want to contribute.
Yep, that totally makes sense. And I think for us, I mean, your sales enablement, the enablement teams, the rev op teams, they are invaluable for our go-to-market team. For companies scaling from early stage, they don't maybe have the luxury of all of these amazing teams and the support from rev ops and enablement that those bigger teams have. Vanessa, in your experience, what should those smaller, sort of earlier stage companies focus on?
It's those alignment rituals. It is the weekly syncs, the shared docs, the Slack channels, the insights that flow from team to team. It really sort of not overly structured, not too formal, but regular and habitual. And I like the term ritual in that sense. It sort of creates that expectation. So it's in those habits.
Yeah. And James, what would your advice be for a company of that stage?
I think don't wait to hire those people. Like I've worked in early stage startups like seed funding, and whilst it's fun running around like a headless chicken, it would be so much more valuable to bring in a RevOps person or an enablement person because they can actually help break down those silos and create better alignment and help you move faster. And that's what's really critical in those early stage companies. How can we do this faster? Hire specialists to do it early on.
That's so interesting because let's talk a little bit more about that actually, because Vanessa, you've said, you can't scale what you haven't necessarily created. So there is a certain point. What would you say? What do you mean by that? Is there a certain point that these companies are in that they know when to do this?
That's a good question. I think I was leaning in again to, having the conditions around that experimentation and that creativity and that testing, iterating and learning and failing, and having, I would say, a solid foundation of that behavior and don't lose it. But again, when you see a spark, when you see something resonate and stick, certain campaigns, certain thing, that is a good indication of a time to sort of bring in RevOps, because you don't It's two things, as I said earlier. You don't want RevOps to sort of to get bogged down too much in chaos of experimentation and that process itself. They're there to operationalize and create a bit more system and efficiency out of things. And at the same time, you don't want the creative innovation and the experimentation, squads and pods to get too bogged down on the, okay, let's get into the process and systematizing and bringing the tools and make everything perfect and structured side of things either. So I think it's as soon as you get a spark, as soon as you see, okay, this is actually is a method that works or a channel that works or, a campaign that works for us, let's operationalize that, then that's a good time to bring in RevOps.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, what I'm hearing as well is it's how you bring them in as well. If, what stage you're at, and it's like, do you need more process? Like, what are the pain points that you're really having that they can really help out with? They are an enablement team, very much so. And it's actually really understand where you are, that deep understanding of what your pain point, your challenges are, and how they can help solve that. Because I think you're quite right, both they can come in and do very different things, can't they? They can come in different ways. And I think that's probably the bit that you've really got to understand.
Yeah. And it's almost with this point, and I like the word enablement, but I always find very often the enablement is like, oh, it's sales enablement. That's the starting point. And I get it. But I haven't really been in an organization where my RevOps function is going, hey, we're enablement for everyone. We're here to share the same insights and train and enable marketing, sales, CS, product, even, get sales. Sometimes it heads into CS. Marketing is usually sort of on their own, doing their own enablement. It was really good when there's that point where, yeah, the experimentation's running, we're learning things, we're starting to collect a lot of data, and it's getting a little overwhelming, that RevOps can, make sense of it and enable everybody, enable all those teams, not just sales, and play that role of the enabler of all.
James, what was it like then, your experience at Exclaimer when we started to bring this in and utilize RevOps?
Yeah, I joined Exclaimer like 3 years ago, when I think RevOps and enablement were in its infancy. And I like to use the phrase, we were kind of like the cupboard of broken things, really. Like that needs fixing, just throw it to enablement or RevOps. And I think it takes a long time for a company who's in that stage like Exclaimer was to try and work out what those functions actually are and actually set clear mandates in the business for what those things are. That takes time, I'm not going to lie, and it's a lot of hard work and effort, but the rewards are massive once you get that right. Once you set that clear mandate, you set those clear expectations with people, suddenly it goes from we never had RevOps to an enablement to suddenly we can't live without RevOps and enablement. And that's a massive journey that I think every company needs to go on.
Definitely. That's exactly how I feel right now. We would be completely lost without those functions. And I think that's when it's been really successful as well. A big part of what they do, a big part of these, RevOps teams is how they manage that data, the go-to-market data. It's something that we never get right. I mean, it's a really tough thing that you're constantly working on as well. And when's the right time, Vanessa? I'm going to come to you on this, to start to bring that data together across teams. And how do you do that without, taking away the innovation? I mean, there's such a balance there, isn't there, between as well?
Yeah, I come back to my point earlier, depending if you're early stage, but even if you're, frankly, it's not even early stage. I think this is the right way, big or small, to, again, let loose those dynamic teams, those cross-functional pods to experiment and learn quickly. And as soon as something gains traction, as soon as you make a decision, you want to double down, that data usually becomes more data and more overwhelming insight to make sense of. And that's a good time for RevOps to step in and make sense of it and bring back that shared picture for all those teams that are working, or use that insight. So I think it's pretty early on. As soon as there's a decision that this channel, this method, this go-to-market tactic works for us, that's when RevOps come in, takes ownership of that data, makes sense of it, cleans it, builds a picture of reality. And again, data is, sometimes we handpick our data to confirm our previous beliefs, and that's fine. To be honest, that's kind of fine as long as all the teams working with it have the same picture of reality. And I think RevOps is the best place, because of the position their company, to do that and to turn around to those teams, go, keep experimenting, guys. Here's what we're learning. Here's that data. Here's what it's showing us. Take that, use that to sort of design your next experiment, to design your next hypothesis. And that's where that innovation will still stay, but you've got that systematized, operationalized like way of approaching data and having it tell a useful story or a shared story to the teams that need to work with it.
I think you've hit it there. I think it's that useful story. I think we all know the KPIs. We all know, like, I mean, how many posts are out there, like that we've all read, blog posts about, here's all the KPIs you should be measuring. And the list just goes on forever. And it can feel really overwhelming at times. And I think it's taking that step back, isn't it? It's taking that step back and going, what are the ones that matter to that whole story, that customer journey story that both James and I can sit at Exclaimer and look at these and go, what is having the most impact in everything that we're doing? And I think that's, I think my team are probably sick of hearing me say the impact word, but that's the holy grail, isn't it? We just want to know what's working, you know, and it's like, and that's where the data, that's what we care about. We just want it to tell that story of what's working so we know what to do more of or what to do less of as well. And James, from your experience, you know, that we do have a lot of data at Exclaimer, and it tells, you know, especially the marketing and the sales team a story. And how have you seen that playing out for you and the benefits of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to like data for me, this is where I'm going to say AI. I'm sorry, but there we go. I've said it. We're like 20 minutes in. And I think this is where like AI starts to become really effective for me in an enablement role. And we can perhaps get into this bit later, but like I've been on a bit of a journey with how to use AI effectively. And I think when I look at tools like Gone, for example, right, like super powerful tool, and it can actually be quite overwhelming in terms of how much data is available. But I've shifted my mindset now, and Vanessa touched upon this earlier. Like, sales enablement is the wrong title, really. Like, actually, the reason why we're all here is customers. So it's like customer enablement. So how can AI and data help us with that? That's what I'm focused on when it comes to data. And tools like Gong can unlock so much on customer conversations. What are our customers saying? What are their objections? What do they care about? What do they not care about? And that can actually help us sell more effectively. So I'm trying to start to think externally now, like what are our customers saying and how can we use that data to sell more effectively as a business?
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's the thing, which for us at the minute is when you come down and actually go, like, what's that customer journey? And, you know, it's back to what do they care and want? And it's actually getting those insights right back to the people that matter. So, you know, the sales team for me, it's like a wealth of knowledge and information. They are at the front line talking to customers, bringing those insights. But you could drown almost in that data and insights coming through, you know, and then that's where these tools like the smartness of going with AI to be able to summarize, and then for us to be able to get that data, that qualitative data coming back in. So then at that top of the journey, we can be talking in that language to customers. We can be giving them the information that they want to know, because that's what's really important through that whole journey. It is giving the information that they want to know. And I couldn't agree more that getting that data back up to there is one of our biggest focuses at the moment, with bringing Gong in as well. Vanessa, from your point of view, what do you see the shift AI making as well for go-to-market teams?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, it's going to be on that pattern recognition, those insights that you gain from calls and transcripts, like from systems like Gong, and then it can, you know, automate drafts of automated emails, summarizing calls for the sales team. I mean, this is extremely helpful from a productivity perspective, but I think it really shines on that pattern recognition and those insights that can then be surfaced back to all the teams that are doing go-to-market campaigns and go-to-market work, as well as the customer themselves. I mean, you think about the speed that can happen when, you know, the AI picks up, you know, a customer expresses a certain type of concern or a certain type of perspective about assessing your product, assessing your service. And if it's able to recognize that that question that they're asking and go, hey, salesperson, or even just directly back to the customer, somehow an automation that's like, hey, here's a case study, or here's a testimonial, or here's something a previous client has said that speaks to exactly the hesitation you're having or exactly the questions you're posing, just to bring that surface things kind of full loop in a much faster way is so handy.
No, absolutely. So what is you brought it up, James. So what is your number one tip then for teams getting started with AI?
The way we started with the exclaimer actually, so I bought myself a Chat GPT Pro license and I started experimenting and I created an exclaimer Chat GPT model. So I trained that model on everything about exclaimer, our product, our customers, our methodology, and I just put it out into the Slack channels and just waited and see what happened. And excitement grew organically. And before we know it, like everyone was using that tool effectively. That's what worked with us. So I keep repeating myself, but like start small. Like you don't need to spend money to do these things. Like try and find cheap, effective, and quick ways to do it, and just try and create excitement organically. The last thing salespeople want, surprise, surprise, is things to be shoved down their throat. Like they want to find things organically and they want that curiosity. Do it with AI because if you can get that right, it can be really effective.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, the sales team being so goal orientated, where they will adopt what helps them, won't they? They will really
Yeah.
that adopt. You try and formalize and try, and I think the way that you did it, I remember watching the uptake of that, and I remember seeing then the sales team starting to share when they were having success with it, because I think that's the other thing. If you have that culture of everyone wanting to help each other, which is something that is phenomenal at Exclaimer. We're so proud of it, that the helpfulness, look, this is working for me, let's share that. And you're a big part of that, setting that culture as well, James, in the team. And I think that's the piece for me that you could really see that culture of, do you know what, we trust James, we're going to test this. And then when you saw people going, yes, I've validated this is working, and you just saw that spiral then out. So I think you're absolutely right. If you try and do that top down, force down approach, it's more of that bottoms up, I think really works as well when you start small, instead of like, we're going to roll this out, we're going to formalize it, there's time and place for those kind of things. But I couldn't agree more with, especially when it comes to AI and new tooling like that you just need to have that experimental mode with.
Yeah, that's a fun point about the experimentation of this function. Like that's the experimental nature of what they can do is, lean into that enablement. It's bottom up, we're enabling you. So they can sort of do experiments like an AI tool or some sort of AI implementation, kind of put it out there and see how the internal stakeholders take it up and make it part of their work. And that I like to see in the RevOps experimentation for sure. That's such a great way to do it.
Well, it was so good to see. We talked about Gong there, which was, I think for us has been adopted so well within the SEAL team. There's obviously a lot of other technologies that are having a big impact on go-to-market strategies in 2025. There's so many of them as well. Again, not only are you drowning in data, you're drowning in which technology, and there's always the shiny new one. There's always the big promises, that they're going to be the all-solving solution. Vanessa, I'm going to come to you first on this one. Is there what would your top technologies to be that actually these are definitely ones that will really help, add value to the teams?
I'm looking at two in particular. I think one's like there's a tool. It's really Stage. I love this woman. She's just a fantastic TikTok AI specialist. It's a tool called Blotato. In terms of automating sort of some of the content creation for different social channels, faceless videos and things like that. I think some of those automation tools to get content that you're created out fast, as well as to sort of surface what's trending, what's viral, and how you can kind of redo it and repurpose it for your context in your business. I think those type of automations are really helpful. I think tools like the Swedish company Lovable for AI coding is really cool, because then you're putting the ability again to experiment, to iterate, to prototype, build little widgets, build little things in the hands of the marketing department, the sales department, the go-to-market team that's like not dependent on development, that they can test out little things that they think might work. So Lovable is another great tool.
Amazing. And James, from your perspective, obviously, big fan of Gong. I think we all are. It's a fantastic tool. Is there any other tools that you would recommend, or has there been ones that actually you've used and maybe haven't quite worked the way that you thought they would?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I went to a networking breakfast 9 months ago, 10 months ago, and this kind of topic came up, and someone said, "We're using an AI prospector tool, and it's not working."
Mm.
And I left that meeting thinking, "Oh, we're about to try one of these. I'm sure it'll be fantastic." And I should have listened to their advice because we tried an AI prospecting tool, and there's lots out there at the moment. Like it's a real hot topic. We tested it, we validated it, we put so much time and resource into it. It just wasn't for us. And I think people should be quite skeptical about going using those types of tools. And I think the importance is just test and validate them. I think for certain size businesses or certain ICPs or buying personas, it can work really well. It didn't work for us. And I think it costed us time and resource. And I'm glad we validated it because now we know, but that's something that I think we definitely made a mistake on.
I think that's the core part, isn't it? Introducing any tool, validate it. Like do
Mm.
experimental mode first when you're in that validation process with the software and just test it. I mean, there's ways, especially within sales teams, that you could almost, and marketing, it's like you could get a certain segment and certain number of salespeople just to test a new technology out instead of taking the whole team. Because as you say, if you took the whole thing through that and everything like that, you could, as a company, you could waste a lot of time and money as well. And I think building that validation process into the contractual stage, I think is really important as well before you sign up, because you've been offered these huge deals, as well. So it's like that unless it's, especially in new areas, I think if it's a tried and tested thing that we know
Absolutely.
works for companies, and the concept is sound, and you're just bringing in a software. But I think you're right in those new areas that is still being tested out. I think validation is really important model to bring in on that as well, which is great. Um, I just wanted to move on. We talked a lot about tools, data, operations, but let's talk something a little bit more emotional. It's like we've got brand, big topic. We're hearing it a lot. A lot of go-to-market leaders that I follow and experts are talking about the importance of brands. And Vanessa, we talked about it. It feels like it's coming full circle. What do you think is driving that?
It's just the amount of noise. Now it's easier than ever to build a product, market a product. It's like the noise is ever growing, and it's gonna grow even more. And to be a company to cut through that, you have to come back to your brand, your meaning, your purpose. And that has to be compelling and honest and authentic and speak to your, hyper focused ICP and really know them and love them and speak to them with that clear intention and meaning. And that is brand. And I think that we're always going to continue to be obsessed with metrics and measuring things, but you can't really measure brand that well. And the data has been shown the when you invest in brand, it pays off. It takes time, but it pays off. And I think now is more than ever, the investment is worth it because of the amount of noise. And that's what's going to differentiate you, is the actual clarity of meaning and purpose behind your business and what you're trying to bring to the world, right?
Absolutely. And James, from your point of view, how does that then resonate for the work that you do for teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think like as Vanessa was saying there, like we got to try and cut through the noise. And I think customers are smarter and more informed than they've ever been when they arrive to a salesperson's inbox. And I think there's a tendency of salespeople to make like assumptions. We know it's X persona, so we know what product and features they're going to be interested in. And we were definitely guilty of that. We've changed our entire sales methodology over the last kind of like 6 to 9 months. It's been a big rollout. And that methodology is not only just transforming the way we sell, but actually transforming the way we listen.
Hmm.
And I think that that's the key thing. It's telling salespeople like to slow down, like listen to the customers, go into that call with zero assumptions about them or their business, and just sit back and listen and get to really understand the challenges that they're going through. And then and only then, when you think you've really understood them at a deep level, do you pivot and start talking about how we can help them. And it's really hard. Like I've been a salesperson, and as soon as you get on the phone to a customer, what do you want to do? You want to start pitching your product, but they don't care about your product. All they care about are their challenges and their problems, and can you solve them? And this methodology has really flipped on its head for us. And Jamal, our VP of Sales, summed up perfectly. It's allowed us to slow down so we can go faster.
Yeah.
That's all it's done, and it's been a really effective program that we've rolled out, and it's so customer centric, and that's what I love about it.
And I think for just to add in there, I think for B2B companies in particular, talk about the way you're doing sales, exactly the right way to do it. But I often call it as like the best salespeople are not selling anything. They're project managing the buying experience. That's their role, is really great, being great project managers. And I think when it comes to brand, they're the best sort of channel and medium and arbiter of the brand. If they know that narrative, they know that story, that meaning, and it's sort of, they know how to articulate it honesty and in an authentic way for themselves. That's really what they need to know and memorize, right? And feel sort of true to them. The features and functions can be brought up later. Somebody's got a list, right? Somebody will come in and do a demo. But if they know how to listen, they understand, and they can be good project managers and then tell the sort of the narrative clearly and in a compelling way, then you've got a great salesperson.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, you both talked about it's authenticity. It's the authenticity at the very start of the journey when you're creating that brand at the top of the funnel, to talk authentically about, we're here to solve these problems. We understand. We've heard this from other customers, and at the very top of the funnel, to talk about that. And I think it's about the purpose of the company and the brand. I think if I think about what our purpose is we are there to enable and help. We know that there's an efficiency issue, that we can really effectively help with, and then we can build out some really exciting, growth drivers on top of that. There's beautiful ways that even just within email signatures that you can start to do things. And I think, if you went out and talked about that in an authentic way and tried to tell people what problems that we think they have that they don't, it's just not going to resonate. And I think, that deep understanding of your customers and that pain, but you've got to authentically really want to be able to help them, because that's what comes through from that top of the funnel right through the sales team as well. It's like, we have this deep belief that our product really helps you and is really going to make a difference in what you're doing. And you have to have that from your product, from your marketing, right into your sales team. And if that authenticity, if it's not there, I don't think it's really what you market or sell. It's just not going to land. So I couldn't agree more with that.
I just want to add, like, I couldn't agree more with what you just said. Like recently, like I've been looking at a specific tool and reached out to a number of vendors, and it amazes me how many vendors are still selling in like the old school way, right? Like where you submit a request on their website, an SDR calls you, they ask you bank questions, you then get onto an AE who repeats the same questions, the follow-up's poor. And as a buyer, I'm like, I'm really busy. I'm sorry, I don't have time for this. You clearly don't care about me. And then some companies I dealt with are doing it the new way, where it's like, I'm going to sit back and listen. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your company. I'm going to make it super easy for you to buy this product. I'm going to coach you and consult you all the way. I mean, I know which company I want to do business with these days, and it's definitely not the one that we've been accustomed to for the last 5 or 10 years in SaaS. It's just not working anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's those brand damaging aspects that, and that's the problem if you're not a fully aligned go-to-market team. Marketing can be
Mhm.
one end, trying to build brand and trust and do all of that. And then if you had a sales team working in that old-fashioned way at the other end, that erodes that trust, doesn't it? It erodes that experience. It is an experience the whole way through the journey that they're having. And suddenly that experience falls down, because I know I've gone on to marketing websites and been really excited about something, and the next thing I get quite an aggressive way of selling to me, to the
Mm.
point where when I'm not answering emails, there's a real passive aggressiveness, and I'm going, hold on, like, I don't understand. I'm just busy. I can't answer every single sales email that comes through, or and I think there is something really interesting in that of if you're not aligned, what one side is doing in marketing can be completely eroded. And also, if you're not aligned in the messaging and everything like that, you just erode that trust, don't you, and that experience for customers.
I know it's kind of a side topic and it's a really icky one that we probably shouldn't get into, but like it does relate to incentives, you know, it is hard to incentives and targets to steer the right behavior. And sales is hard. It is a hard job where you get a lot of no's, and I understand those the incentives and commission model the way that exist, but it has its deleterious effects that it can be hard to motivate this type of behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember thinking, you know, when I was in a company one time, and you know, it was almost like they had a really big sales target and they had to hit, and it was like kind of coming towards the end of the month. And I just remember thinking that must be a horrible experience for the customers on the other end of that.
Yeah.
You know, because what they were feeling was they were feeling our target, they were feeling our problem.
Yeah.
And I thought that must be a terrible experience on the other end of that. And it, back to James's point was, why would you want to buy if you're in that experience? You know, you've got to build trust. We're asking for a contract. We're asking for money. We're asking for a long-term relationship, and the damage that can be done in those interactions, you know, can be very long-term as well. Especially, let's talk about it. You know, where there's review sites everywhere. You know, so you've got to remember, so they're just not reviewing the product anymore. They're reviewing the whole entire experience as well. And I think that's something that people really need to take into account as well.
And I want to add on too that in these, you know, why having these cross-functional teams, why bringing together these groups, either period, you know, for a periodic assignment or permanently is so essential is because there's still this attitude between sort of, you know, product and engineering and sales, as you know, uh sales are not value adding, they're sort of a necessary evil. At least in the Nordics there's still a lot of that attitude out of product engineering. And you know, there's been enough research to show the value add and the experiential add that a good sales experience gives to the customer. I think they absolutely add a lot of value when they do, you know, when they do this job well. They are necessary. They really help the buying experience. As I said, I bought a lot of software. The salespeople that I dealt with that treated it like they were my project managers, they were honest and authentic, and they helped move me along, created a fantastic experience for me. And I would have never picked that software if it wasn't for them.
I agree, and I think you're absolutely right. And James, I want you to talk to this as well. It's that if you put the wrong structure and incentives in place, it's like they should be viewed as a partner. I mean, from my point of view, I think our sales team are the most valuable team we have because they are right at the front line with our customers at that critical point when we're starting that relationship with them. And I think, you know, to me, I feel like that they are those partner setters. You know, they're the ones starting that partnership. And that's how I certainly feel about them. Jill, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree, and I think like the message that we tell to our salespeople, like we sell to IT, right? And like the narrative, the overarching narrative we say to our salespeople is like, how can we make IT the hero in this? Like that's the message that we want you focused on when you have these conversations. Like, how can you make them the champion? How can you make them the hero? And that's the narrative we want them to carry through the entire sales process and even post sale. Like that's the important thing. Don't just throw them across to CS. Like think about it, care about it. Like think about that whole project and that whole customer life cycle. And it ties back to that GTM alignment, right? It's like salespeople should care about CS and support. They should care about the types of customers that they're bringing into the business and they're sending through to them. They should care about top of funnel and what leads are coming through. Like it all brings itself together. And I think we're at that point now where thankfully, I think more companies are waking up to that point than not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're right. And I think it's how, when you've got that go-to-market alignment, you have that overall ownership. And I think that's where, you know, within marketing, it's certainly the message that, you know, it used to be, it's all about MQLs. I talk about revenue, I talk about long-term impact and that longer-term relationship. And that's really important because if you're talking about, okay, well, we get it to this point and then it doesn't really matter. We don't care after that in that customer journey. That is where you start to get these silos, you start to get these behaviors as well, that for the customer, just it's not a good experience and it doesn't build that long lasting relationship. And I think that's a real shift that we have seen as well, is actually caring on that end to end journey because we're one team, you know, as well.
But I emphasize the point that you're saying here around, and I think you're being modest and saying, you know, marketing it's strong leadership from the top. It's the executive team coming together in alignment and going, this is the condition we're setting for our team. This is the culture. This is the foundation and with the way we want them to operate. Because I do see at the, you know, at the customer facing level, at the ground level, everybody knows this. Like as an employee, you want to work this way. You actually care about your customers. Most salespeople, they care about the customer. But if an incentive, it's not structured in a way that reinforces that behavior, they can sort of go, well, I care, but I'm not rewarded for caring that much, right? So it has to come from the top of, this is the way, this is the conditions we're saying, this is the way we want our teams to operate and collaborate and work together. That is the key to success. And everybody will naturally flow because people care about their customers. People care. They care about each other and they care about their customers.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely core. Just want to, we're starting to get to the end of this, which has been an amazing discussion. Thank you both so much. Just wanted to do some takeaways. You know, Vanessa, we'll go to you and your main takeaway for that go-to-market alignment.
Yeah, I think I've said it many times. It's just design for that strong collaboration, create that condition for psychological safety and trust, so teams can feel safe to experiment and learn and make mistakes. Alignment is not just going to happen on its own. You really have to create the executives, the leadership have to create the systems and the habits for that to happen.
Sounds great. And James, what are your?
I mean, I think that's like, as I said at the start, I think like with GTM teams now, like stop just waving at each other, like hold hands, like it's fine. And I think don't make assumptions about if people care about what you're working on or if it can impact them. Just have the conversation. You would be amazed at what comes from it and the alignment created from that. And I think from a startup perspective, like we're talking about when do you bring in enablement, when do you bring in RevOps? I mean, I'm joking, half joking, like have a whiteboard with alignment, data, enablement, process, optimization. If you start ticking those words off, you probably need to bring someone in.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think for me, it's what you're both saying. It's building that trust. You know, I think for me, it's giving people the permission to come and ask for that help. And I think that was something that's when you'll start to see that real deep collaboration. You know, for me, get rid of that blame culture. Get rid of that. No, that's their problem. You know, we sent them as many MQLs as we could. It's up, you know, sales just didn't then follow through. Have that end-to-end ownership, build up that trust that we are all in this together, and then open yourselves up. I think the main question, you know, when anyone reaches out to me, it's like, how can I help? What do you need? How can I help? And really care, but really mean it. And I think building that trusted culture that you talk about, you both have talked about so well today, I think is absolutely critical for this as well. And with that, we're at time. I just want to say a huge thank you to both Vanessa and James for such sharp, actionable insights. And of course, thanks to everybody for joining us on this webinar. Thank you so much for any questions that people have added. We will follow up, as always, with answers, and we'll also send out the recording. So if you're interested as well in seeing how Exclaimer helps unify go-to-market messaging through everyday email, please reach out or request a demo from some of our wonderful sales team who will be more than happy to understand the challenges you have and take you through how we can add value to what you're doing. So again, thank you so much to James and Vanessa, and thanks for joining us. And we can't wait to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks.